Good afternoon from Kingston. Eric Francis Coppolino back with you with a replacement of yesterday's mostly lost special edition podcast, Starcast, on the issue of weather modification as potentially revealed in astrology. Some of my history with studying that astrologically, and then also a look at the charts for Helene and Milton, not Marvin. Hurricanes Milton and Helene making landfall, one of which happened on the 26th of September, the other on the 9th of October. One of those twin hurricane phenomena that tend to stir up a lot of discussions. Now, the reason why I'm treating this issue at all is because since Helene made its way across kind of southern U.S. and then made a big mess in North Carolina, there has been a lot of discussion of these the theory of enhanced and fabricated weather events, and this has become a very hot topic of discussion on the internet. It is very important to consider the environment in which this discussion is happening, along with the pre-existing human tendency to think that what happens in your era of history is the worst thing ever. It was a big thing during COVID. There was a lot of one for the grandkids type of thinking. Oh, what a great story this will make for future generations and all that. And the reason why I photo edited the article the way that I did yesterday with photos of wild devastation from previous hurricanes that could not have taken place under the influence of either global warming or any form of technological enhancement of weather patterns, is to show that there have been big storms for as long as we've been writing it down, and long before. I made the joke about the big flood mentioned in the Bible, and these things are always mythologized. Only now in the internet environment, this digital environment, everything is magnified. The news travels much faster. Rumors travel faster. Things are wildly exaggerated, and everyone is an expert. Just get a Substack account and pick a topic, and you too are an expert. And so I am concerned that there is an environment that is not very curious about the truth of these things, and that also does not have its perceptual filters up, that is not verifying information and sources of information and sources of theories, and instead is just accepting pretty much anything that is put in front of it, meaning people are accepting anything put in front of them as long as it supports their pre-existing point of view. And then this just magnifies on itself and creates these kind of bubbles that keep swelling, and the more people believe something, the more people believe that it must be true, and it goes on and on. Now, another facet of the environment is that there's a lot of end-timey thinking going on. A lot of we are at the end of the world. This must all be heading towards some grand cataclysmic event that is the end of the world. And added to that, there's lots of let's get it over with type of thinking also, but that's not how it works. That's not how it's going to work. And there's going to be survivors of any mass cataclysm. And if should something happen, and there has been this endless discussion certainly through the entire modern era, hundreds of years of the end and Jesus coming back and all you suckers better look busy. Furthermore, the Atlantean theme is also very big, and that theme is the fear that humanity is going to destroy itself with its technology. Now, I think this is happening, but I think that the physical world's, like the impact on the physical world of technology is nothing compared to the spiritual impact of the technology that we are imbibing. The way that imbibing completely soaked the deluge is the technology environment that we are in, and few know even how to form a cohesive question about what that might be doing. I'm measuring this in part by the number of times I have written about it or talked about it, which seems to be pretty much every time I open up the microphone, and how little serious discussion about this situation has emerged, whether it's serious discussion about one's personal situation. That I get a little bit more of. People trying to undo the effects and talking about how they like to go watch the sunrise and be out in their garden and things like this. And almost no discussion of the collective event, this ongoing rolling dislodging consciousness from its physical roots and destabilizing intellect, culture, and society in the process. And I also think that one of the most serious problems that bridges the personal and the interpersonal is that when beings are dislodged from their awareness, when beings are shocked out of their body consciousness, which manifests as insanity, it's got nothing to do with your downward dog. It has to do with whether the thoughts in your mind make any sense, and also the casualness of attack in our culture, particularly in the digital. But there's a fascination for physical attack in the digital realm. Nobody has much of a taste for it in actually standing around and watching an assault of some kind. But people sure do like to read about it, and they pay to read about it. And as I've described a number of times, as far as I understand it, and I did learn this from studying Marshall McLuhan, that the disembodied electrical state leads people to use aggression as a tool for self-actualization. So we're and so this is what we're seeing, and we're in the midst of this huge mashup, and in the midst of this huge mashup, when a storm reaches the United States, a storm hits the coast of Florida or whatever, then a second one comes, and there's all this discussion of the storm being an enhanced event of some kind with no actual proof. That shows that people are credulous and they're believing what they want to believe. I'm not saying it's not happening. In fact, in this article, I point to a couple of different sources saying that I know that geoengineering is happening. I don't describe one in any detail. I do describe, I know someone personally who did an investigation during the Vietnam War of weather change experiments by the Army. And I say outright that at the time they said the only thing between them and being able to do it better was computer bandwidth. Is that really true? Is it not true? I'm just telling you what someone I trust found out, what they said, based on what their investigation led to. This is someone I've known now for 32 years and studied with to a great depth. And so when these things come bubbling up to the surface, I think that, and the discussion happens and it takes over, and a lot of people believe this. A lot of people believe that Asheville was targeted, that Tampa was targeted. with no specific basis other than circumstantial evidence at best, a quartz mine in near Asheville, where something like 80 or 90% of the world's purest quartz comes out of for all of these technology devices. So we're turning Tampa into a 15-minute city. That's circumstantial evidence. That is about belief. And here on the Planet Waves channel, you're either belief is identified as belief or it's not dealt with at all. And the problem with belief is that it's easy, it's lazy, and it requires no evidence. It is simply a feel-good thing that is kind of, in a way, self-righteous and compels people to assert that they are right without any basis for saying so. So that all said, and by the way, I would add finally, P.S. We're living in the post-COVID world where a lot of people think the Earth is flat, and people think that King Charles is a vampire, and that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones never actually wrote a song. And I used to have a list of these literal, actual conspiracy theories, again, with no basis. I have probed into each and every one. Well, I haven't looked into Charles being a vampire, but maybe that's true. But when you get down to the evidence and the people's basis for belief, it is so ridiculously flimsy. And we are living on the heels of what, as far as I can tell you, after a direct 3.5-year investigation, was shutting down of the world and the imposition of an injection without any legitimate medical or scientific basis to do so. But that does not prove that everything else is fake. But I can see spiritually where people might be sufficiently destabilized as to think that because that is fake, then everything else is fake. And there's quite a bit of paranoia mixed in with all this. And on the one hand, I can't blame people. But on the other, I think we have a responsibility to ourselves to have some perspective. And that's what I plan to bring a bit of today. And I've just done that for the past 13 minutes and 15 seconds, as well as I'm going to offer a little bit of perspective on my personal journey looking at the possibility of manipulated weather events, but also false flag events. Now, I picked up the thread of this on September 11th, 2001. And then between September 11th and the Fukushima incident 10 years later, in 2001 was 9/11, Fukushima 2011, I noticed a series of charts for these big events where 29 degrees of Gemini was activated. And that just seemed to be a pattern running through a number of these charts. And there were so many that I began to use that as an indicator for potential false flag incidents. So when we talk about a manipulated weather event, that would be under the broader heading of false flag, because it's a thing that's blamed on nature, but really it's actually being done by people. Or a false flag event is 9/11, blamed on Arab terrorists lurking in caves, and somehow they coordinated, airline strikes, coordinated hijacking and pilot training and all of this stuff to hijack 4 airplanes and strike 3 into national landmarks like the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And this, too, is destabilizing, but I kept seeing this degree of the zodiac coming up. And I first saw it in the 9/11 chart. And then I think next in the Banda Aceh earthquake on Boxing Day 2004. And then it just kept manifesting. And so I began to look more closely, and I found out that there is a fixed star in that position. The fixed star is called Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse, and this star has the signification of rare engines of war. This does not come from a modern source. It comes from William Lilly, the author of the first textbook in English, astrology textbook in English in 1647, Rare Engines of War. And it started to occur to me that maybe we were in the middle of a war where all of these environmental things were being used as weapons. So I did some probing into this, and it is you find out after not too long that there are definitely attempts to modify the weather using various forms of chemistry and cloud seeding, and that there is a thing called HARP, and that they can beam things all the way up to the ionosphere. That's basically what HARP does. And I don't understand the technology of storms well enough to argue how a storm works, nor the technology of HARP to discuss how HARP works and where the two might meet, i.e., can they use this thing up in the ionosphere to move a storm around? But I do have a policy of not ruling things out until I can rule them out. So a lot of things go in what I call the middle column. The middle column is uncertain, not sure. There's no definitive proof either way. And investigative reporting involves basically starting with a lot of things in the middle column and then gradually establishing the evidence for things that can be said to be proven, or looking at the evidence for things that are said to be true, and then you evaluate the evidence and find out, well, that really goes in column one, that which is not proven and unlikely. So there really are three columns here. And for me, weather control and the manufacturing of earthquakes go into the middle column, which is the unknown, with the notation that there is evidence for their existence and many attempts by humanity to try to do these things. And it looks a little better than, for example, gain-of-function research in viruses, which appears to be kind of a lab exercise and a thing that's going on in the budget, but which cannot produce actual results. Or if the results have been attained, there is no proof that that's what's going on. So I end up having to do this with scientific issues quite a bit, whether it's toxicology, my original field, and then astronomy, my second field of science, and then getting into all this biological and diagnostic testing over the past 4.5 years. All right, so when I evaluate a chart, I basically apply a series of checks to the chart, and one of them is, does this look like the thing that it is said to look like? Does it appear? Does it match the picture in some way? This is the first test of an astrological chart, of any astrological chart, including a natal chart. And what you're looking for is what matches and what doesn't look like it matches, and it is a circumspect way of investigating. This is astrology does not present hard evidence. The chart itself is circular, and so there's a circular form of thought, which is not circular reasoning, but the movement of the thought pattern is kind of dancing around a circular diagram, and so the standards of evidence have to be different than those in a world where something is linear and things are reduced down to a very narrow set of principles. That is generally not true in astrology. But there are various forms of sniff tests and kind of rules that can be followed. And so the first one is, does this look like what it portends to be? And then I'm looking also for activity around a 28 Gemini. Still to this day, I check that degree frequently, especially when I have a question. And we do get some activity around this degree in both of these charts. I'm just notating. I'm notating my charts here with things I want to talk about in a second. So in the Helene chart, I'm going to write this a little more clearly. The chart describes something quite big. It describes, well, the thing doing the describing is that there's a very, very large point at 1407 Gemini called the Great Attractor, and that is sitting on the 7th house cusp. And by the way, let me go back one. This is a very complicated topic, and I'm trying to get it into like under 3 hours. So for hurricanes, the chart to use is landfall. Landfall is the chart when the storm eye reaches the coast. It's not when the storm itself touches the coast. It's when the eye of the storm passes over the coastline that the storm is approaching. So this is very important to be consistent in these readings. And the other thing is I'm not using the strict rules of horary here. I'm using many additional points. And I could strip this down to bare horary, but for now, I'm not doing it. So in the Helene chart, we come up with a lot of energy on the 7th house. That looks like a great big storm making landfall. It certainly does not contradict it. Saturn is square this point quite closely. Saturn is way directly up in the chart. Now, you could argue that that indicates the presence of the government, and let's not cross that off the list. It's still going to go in the center column. Looking at the 28 and change of Gemini, we find this degree is indirectly activated. It's taking a square from Neptune. So Betelgeuse is taking a square from Neptune. And that, to me, argues possibly two different ways. One way is that it could mitigate toward looking for deception around the issue, possible false flag, and then it can also say, don't be deceived, don't rush to conclusions in thinking this is something that it's not. Additionally, I use the asteroid Atlantis as a marker, and Atlantis was approaching Betelgeuse at 27 plus degrees, and so that mitigates slightly toward activating this degree. But Neptune is so involved, and so when Neptune is so involved, it is essential to slow down and be cautious and not come to conclusions. If you rush to conclusions with Neptune present, you're probably going to be wrong. There are possibilities where you could just look at something and say, Neptune is there, we'll never know the truth. And it's fair to apply that maxim to this set of events. And I would note that you can't really know the truth about this. And second, it is not something of direct personal impact. If the storm lands on your city, state, village, county, or town, you've got a problem no matter what caused that storm. But it doesn't come down to something like, they say there's a virus, should I personally get the vaccine and potentially change my life irrevocably by getting this shot that cannot be sucked out of the body as quickly as it was put in, can't be sucked out at all. So it's a very different issue than something like the claim of a virus and the proffering of a vaccine, because there is no way to make a personal decision based on the issue of whether the climate is being intentionally manipulated using technology, and I mean intent. This is what I'm talking about. An actual, a very high level of intent, the plan to do so. We're beyond the intent of foreknowledge of possible consequences. Now we're into the desire to get a result, the premeditation of a result. That's what this discussion's about. So back to this chart. Great attractor sitting right on the 7th. Saturn squared that. Okay. Neptune squaring Betelgeuse. Atlantis squaring Betelgeuse. Also of note, Jupiter in the very conspiratorial last degree of Capricorn, the group of men running the world. But I have to say, looking at this chart, it is not, these factors are not tipping the scales on intent. And the charts always look good at the beginning or often, and the events always look pretty good, and then slowly the chart reveals the secrets and they fall apart, which is why I want to hold this case open and not like say we're settling it. And I think that the scientific arguments for and against climate modification need to be heard by people who actually know what they're talking about, not by people who are selling something, but people who are able to argue both sides. And I'm never trusting of this argument when it is too vehemently one side or the other, because the truth is that nothing is impossible. But while nothing is impossible, the powers that be have a tremendous interest in making us think they can do anything. This in itself is a kind of a meme that is going around, that the government is so absolutely all-powerful that it can get any result, create any effect, and that's it. It's that simple. And I think that contains a good bit of deception and of perceptual bias. All right, let's take a look at the Milton chart. This is a significantly more interesting chart, and I think that it's a little easier to read this chart. There's more going on, and part of why there's more going on is it has many of the same features of the Helene chart, but it's developed. It's 2 weeks later. It's developed quite a bit, and the ascendant is different. The rising sign is now not the dead center of Gemini, but rather the dead center of Taurus. So there's much more Earth in this chart. For example, the moon is in Capricorn instead of Leo. And what we get in the Milton chart is something I've been talking about for a long time, which is that the Hunger Games aspect is activated. In case you haven't been listening to various editions of this podcast or of Planet Waves FM, and I've pretty much talked about this every week since June, the Hunger Games cluster, or the grape and the grain, as I've been calling it, is at the early degrees of Capricorn. It's ranging from about Ixion at 5 degrees out to Ceres at 12.5 degrees. And this group is, I think it is seething with family issues, with trust issues, and with multi-generational crisis that is waiting to just kind of burst out of its container. And the whole arrangement is square the lunar nodes. And the moon is passing right through this as Milton makes landfall. You'll see a blue arrow on the top right of the chart pointing to the moon Pholus conjunction, and then the little pink lines indicating that this is at 90 degrees to the lunar nodes. So this looks like a lot of past karma coming up. But the whole climate crisis is the result of past karma and tons of hubris, and also having products forced on us that we don't really understand the environmental impact of them, or if we do, we're conned out of it by people who are saying, oh no, that DDT is perfectly safe, just go ahead and spray that on everything, or that Roundup is perfectly safe, just go spray that on everything. Oh, that heart medicine, that blood pressure medicine, that hernia mesh, that insulin, that testosterone supplement, all the million vitamins, oh, it's perfectly safe. We've got a lot of people saying this about every fucking thing. With this aspect pattern so boldly emphasized in the chart, I can see where people would believe that this is intentional. But it doesn't look so intentional to me, as it looks like legacy baggage. It looks like legacy material revealing itself, rearing its head, expressing its existence. And you get that quality of the tipping point over and over again when you've got this cluster of 5 minor planets now plus the moon at 90 degrees to the lunar nodes. Now, I've been talking about this grouping in terms of family legacy as it involves alcohol. And we had Ceres parked there all summer, and Ceres represents grain and products manufactured from grain, and Pholus, which the moon is conjunct and which both are square to the lunar nodes, represents wine and the multi-generational impacts, influences, and effects of alcohol generally. And so whether these storms are moved or manipulated by science, by the lords of technology, we're still dealing with legacy material of the human experience, one way or the other. Even if petroleum, global warming does not exist, let's just go the far extreme, and the planet's warming up for some other reason other than burning fossil fuels, the fact that so many people believe and accept that the environment is warming up due to the burning of fossil fuels is in itself legacy material that we will be carrying around like for the rest of civilization. And plus, the warming of the planet is a scrim for 100 other issues. I personally think that the hormone pollution issue is much more significant than the warming issue, and the hormone pollution issue is just brushed off. It is covered up. There was a hideous article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, which is masterful at covering up the hormone pollution issue. It wrote one article about it like in 1990 or something. I think I've got it in one of my folders. And it was, is tuna fish safe, even though it's got all this mercury? Well, the article goes on and on about mercury and how bad it is and how much tuna fish you should eat, and concludes it's really not that bad because tuna fish is so good. And you piss the mercury out of your system, which I'm not sure about. You piss the mercury out of your system real fast, and P.S., they don't mention that heavy metals are hormonally toxic as well as neurologically toxic, and they don't mention the other stuff that's in the fish, like the PCBs, the DDT, and the dioxin. And so this article that posits itself as a debate over mercury in tuna is actually a cover-up of all the chemicals in the tuna, only you don't notice it because the magician's assistant is standing there distracting you. And most people don't know to ask the question, nor do they want to ask the question. So these charts grow more interesting as I read them, which is often the case. It may end up being a case of like the HIV announcement chart. I've got some work on that. If one person requested in the comments, I'll move that forward. The HIV, the chart for the announcement of HIV, I have the same experience every time I read it. I look at the chart and I go, yawn, and then I stare at it for 5 seconds and I say, holy fuck, how is this possible? And then 5 minutes into reading it, like for the 23rd time, my eyes are popping out of my head. The Milton chart is more compelling this way than the Helene chart. But the Milton chart, mitigating against a plan, just shows a lot, and Helene does this too. There's just a lot of energy in the environment that could feed this kind of thing. And we have Neptune kind of in its subtle way foghorning a warning about don't believe everything that's put in front of you. And that's not to say that you call bullshit on everything. I think you've got to have a reason to call bullshit. But I think also we are living in times when there is so much confirmation bias and so much suspicion that, for example, anyone who claims to be against the existence of viruses can become a hero kind of overnight. I've seen this happen a few times, and they can be completely full of shit. And people are so eager to have anything and anyone validate their belief, their perception that viruses don't exist. And I am on the short list of people who have helped prove that there is a really serious problem here. And they can't test for a virus, and they can't test for infection. And all the viruses they have were conjured in computer programs like Megahit and Blast and different ones, Pymol and different ones. And don't exist in physical reality. Well, this has had a very serious, shocking effect that is largely operating below the surface. And people know, even if they don't want to admit it, that they were duped big time in 2020. This has, well, Mark Bailey says he thinks this is the source of the destabilization. On one level, he's right. But I think that the destabilization and the falling for the virus and the falling for the flat earth and you know, Keith Richards can't even play guitar and, you know, whatever, are all products of this wider, deeper destabilization by digital technology that we simply do not have the language and the mental apparatus to look at, but we better make it pretty fast if we want to survive in this very strange new wilderness that we are in. Okay, so this is my good deed for the day, redoing this thing. I've had 2 audio mishaps this week, and now I'm going to have, I've changed my work algorithm, my workflow on audio. Now I'm going to back up every file to multiple drives instantaneously. And this weekend here in Kingston is the O Positive Festival, the 14th O Positive Festival. It's kind of a music, healing arts festival where, you know, the old Dutch church is converted into a concert hall, and lots of fun things and people coming in from out of town. The farmers market is getting ready to wind up for the year. That's right before Thanksgiving, but still these are, I think, the best markets with the most stuff, and weather's cool and people are coming out. And then there's the Italian American Festival on Sunday, and I am planning to put on my press card and roam around and get interesting photos of the most interesting things that I can find in my little burg of Kingston this weekend. I'm easily reached at efc@planetwaves.net. Please check out The Awakening, the 2025 edition of Planet Waves. Thank you for being a paying subscriber or one of the people who were comped about 6 weeks ago, I mentioned we're having this billing problem. A good many people voluntarily sent in their subscription fees for the past 2 months. If you are one of them, thank you very much. If you're interested in doing this kind of astrology, I also do personal healing work astrology, but really my first love is, as a journalist, my first love is mundane astrology. There's a lot of fun to be had, and it gets you off the level of ego and personality. You have to be much more objective, and it's no longer all about you. It becomes about the world. Okay, that all said, signing off at 1:41 p.m. on 10/11/24. Lots of love, and bye for now.